Hello there. In this video I'm just going to talk a little bit about Obj files and using Netfabb Basic, which is a repair tool for ensuring that your objects that you create will be 3D printable. So if we go to Fluid Designer, I'm going to go to the bracelets folder and I'm just going to choose one of the bracelets here to demonstrate what's happening here. So I'm just going to choose this curve bracelet. It doesn't matter which object I choose. Just drag that onto the workspace. Now, Fluid Designer, in the background, working away, is an application called Blender. And Blender saves files in the blend format. And if you look at the top of your screen here, you'll see that the file name of this object at the moment is curve bracelet 65mm 001 master BLEND. And blend is the file format, the default file format for all of the objects that you see in the panel. If I just go to File and New, all of these objects here are actually Blender files, and you can actually see that if you look. It says .blend, .blend, .blend for all of them. And we don't recommend that you actually replace any of those files. We recommend you treat all of these files as template master files, which is why we've added the word master there. You don't write on top of them. We always recommend that instead of doing file and save, you do file and export and leave the original file on your hard drive for future use. Because if you write on top of these, you may not be able to use it again. It just depends what you do. Obviously, the more advanced user you become, then yeah, sure, you can then start to change things. But we don't recommend that for beginners. Now, if I just go to File and Recent again and open up that curve. Okay, so the file format for this object currently is a Blender file. And this object has been created by using some, it's been created by using some curves. Okay, so if I remove this, let me just double check what the cross-section diameter is. The cross-section diameter is 1mm. If I remove that, you can see the basic curves that make up this particular bracelet. And if I just put that thickness back in again now, and it's also created using some modifiers, so you can change the rows and change the columns, and you can also set the bracelet size, which is a curve modifier. So these modifiers for columns and rows are actually what are called array modifiers, and this is a curve modifier, and these are used to generate this particular pattern. And if I actually set that value back to 1, you'll see that that's the basic pattern, that's the basic curve pattern that makes up the bracelet. And if I press the tab key on the edit mode and zoom in, you can see the curve itself, and all those dots there are the control points. And so if I just put the count back to 10, which is where it started off with, so we're creating this bracelet by taking a pattern, this one object here, and replicating it, and in this instance wrapping it around a curve as well. Now, if we want to 3D print this object, one thing that we need to do is to change it from a curve. It's a curve at the moment. You can see that from the icon over here in the outliner window and the icon in the properties panel. It's a curve at the moment. We need to change that curve to a mesh. Now you can actually go to Tools, Object Tools, and convert it to a mesh here. And let me just put the properties panel open again. Because what happens is when you do this, when you convert this to a mesh, what Fluid Designer does is it applies all these modifiers, and they all disappear now. And so there's no curve icon there, and there's no modifiers. And this is no longer a curve, it's now a mesh. So if I go into edit mode and zoom in, you can see the individual vertices, the edges and the faces that make up the mesh. So you can convert it to a mesh before you export the file. But if I just do edit and undo, and let me try edit and undo a second time, yeah, that just goes back to my curve now. So you can see I've got the curve again, curve data and the modifiers again. It's not really necessary for you to convert this to a mesh by doing tools, object tools and convert to mesh. In most cases, there are occasions when you do have to do it, but in most cases you don't need to do it, because when you go to file and export, and we always recommend using the wavefront Obj file format, when you export it as a wavefront format, what Fluid Designer does is it applies the modifiers, and it's very important that this box is actually ticked. If the box isn't ticked, the modifiers won't be applied, and instead of getting the entire bracelet, you'll just end up with one individual Enipper pattern. So it's very important this box is ticked. It should be ticked for you when you're going to export this as an Obj file format. I like to export to the desktop, and I'm just going to delete the word master now because this isn't the master one, this is the printable one. So we save that, notice, as an Obj file, not a Blender file, an Obj file. So if we export that to the desktop, that exports as an Obj file. Now there is another file format that a lot of people use for 3D printing, and that's the Stl file format. Now I tended not to use that when working with Fluid Designer, but we'll just have a look at it here. So if we go to File and Export, if I export it as an Stl format, notice that this box over here, Apply Modifiers, is not ticked. It's not ticked, this option over here. So if I don't tick it, if I don't tick that box, if I export this as an Stl file, and let me just check that I'm on the desktop, yes I am, export it as an Stl file, and I'll just delete master as well. So I export it as Enipper curve bracelet 65mm Stl. I'll export that file to the desktop, but notice I didn't apply the modifiers there. This is still a curve at the moment, as can be seen in the properties panel or in the outline window, and also the colour of it, the grey colour rather than the white. So the thing that you always must do after creating something in Fluid Designer for 3D printing, you absolutely must, every single time, run the file, run the Obj or the Stl file through this application called Netfabb Basic, because what Netfabb Basic does is it checks the file, and it will, generally speaking, most of the time, actually do some minor repairs to the file. So you can download Netfabb Basic for free from the internet if you just type Netfabb Basic, or as an alternative, if you don't actually want to use Netfabb Basic, if you go onto the internet and go to this website, tools3d.azurewebsites.net, or if you Google Microsoft 3D printing, you can register as a user on this website, and you can get your files repaired on the internet by uploading them to the internet. Netfabb Basic is actually used there. Your files will be repaired, and then you can download them. So if you don't want to install Netfabb Basic on your machine, you can use this application on the internet. This is actually a little bit more powerful than Netfabb Basic, so if you do find that Netfabb can't fix your files, it may be worth going to this website and uploading your Obj or Stl files there to see whether that will actually fix it. But in the background of this application is Netfabb. So if I just go back to Netfabb now, If we go to, now using Netfabb's quite easy, you don't need to worry about all of these icons and all of these menus. This is all you actually need to do. You go to Project and Open, go to the desktop, and I'm going to open the OBJ file first of all, which is this top option here, Enter per Curve Bracelet, and it's the OBJ file. So I'm going to open that up. And when I do that, what you're going to find is that it's going to give me an error message. It's going to give me a warning red triangle look. And this tells me that there's something wrong with this object, that it's not 3D printable. And if I just zoom in, you can see there are some black lines here around these edges of the bracelet, around the edges of each pattern. And what we need to do in Netfabb is repair this. And all you need to do is to click on the repair button, which is this plus icon here on the toolbar. And if you click on Update here, you can see what's wrong with this mesh. There are 22 holes and there are 22 border edge problems. Now these are very, very minor problems. Mathematically very small holes. So a Netfabb will actually fix them for us. So if we click Automatic Repair and Execute, and if we click Apply Repair and Remove All Parts, the warning red triangle has now disappeared. So what Netfabb has done is it's analysed where there are holes and it's put faces where those holes are, and it's analysed where there are border edge problems and it's made some modifications to them, and these are really tiny modifications, and now we should have a 3D printable object. So it's a case of opening a project, clicking on the repair one and running it. And then what you do is go to File, Export the part, export it as a wavefront object, export it to the desktop, and notice Netfabb adds this little bit of text repaired to your file name, and you just save it. And that's it. That's all you actually need to do in Netfabb. Nothing more than that. Now if I just go to Project and New, and discard this one and go to Project and Open, and if I open the Enter per Curve bracelet that's the Stl file, and remember I didn't apply the modifiers to this one, if I click Open I get my warning red triangle again, but more importantly zoom to the selected part. It doesn't want to zoom in for some reason. Okay, sorry, it doesn't want to zoom in. No, doesn't want to zoom in. But if you look at that part there, you can see that that's just one Enter per Curve. It isn't the entire object, because I deliberately made a mistake when I exported that Stl file. The modifiers were not applied. So it's very important to apply the modifiers. Really important. Okay, so if I just go back to Fluid Designer again, so whenever your object is grey like this, it's still likely to be a curve. You can go to Tools, Object Tools and convert it to a mesh there, but it's not necessary to actually do that if you export the files as OBJ file format. Do be wary if you try and export your files as STL that you may need to tick the apply modifier box here, but not as OBJ. As I say, I recommend sticking to the OBJ file format. Okay, so that's the end of this video on OBJ and using Netfabb Basic. Thank you.